Welcome to our third virtual town hall meeting. For those who don't know me, my name is Suzanne Poole, and I'm president of your board at Credit Valley. The other board members that you'll see on the screen in alphabetical order are Jim Carmichael, Jim Fakney, Marianne Finn, Peter Hossack, Sarah Hurst, Keith Mowat, Catherine Potechin, and Brent Walker. Thank you all for joining us. I know everyone's lives are busy, and we appreciate the time you taking the time to join us on this Zoom meeting. This is obviously the town hall, primarily to discuss and to answer questions relating to the 6-month report that came out just last week. We have received some questions by email, which we'll be answering. We'll also have the Q&A, the chat function available throughout, so please feel free to add questions as we go through the session, and we'll do our best to answer those for you as well. Before I hand things over to our COO, I'd like to thank the entire management team for their incredible and extraordinary leadership through these very challenging times. It's certainly been a unique year. I'd also like to thank all of the staff. You know, I'm sure I'm not alone that Credit Valley is my happy place. And I'm only able to go to my happy place and do what I love and play golf and enjoy our dining and enjoy the patio and everything else because of the hard work that our entire staff puts in every single day. So I know on behalf of the entire membership, we owe them a huge debt of gratitude for all that they take care of for us. I'd also like to thank the membership for your patience. These are unique and untraveled times that we're all in, and it's been certainly a challenging time for all of us to navigate through, and I thank you for your patience and your understanding as we go through these unprecedented situations. And last but far from least, this has certainly been an interesting year to be a member of the board of any organization, certainly a member of the Credit Valley board. And I can tell you that the faces you see before you are an extraordinary group of people to whom I owe a huge debt of gratitude for their commitment, for their untold number of hours. And I just feel very, very fortunate that I get to work with this group of people, and we together try to muddle through all of the challenges that we face. So thanks to all of you. So I will hand it over to Jason, and I know you have some remarks, and then you've got some of the questions that you've received by email. So I'll let you get going.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Suzanne. Good evening, everybody. Just a quick little housekeeping items before we get going. The way I've tried to lay out this evening to kind of keep everything moving on track is the questions that have been all submitted in advance. I've organized them in order of the portfolios that were presented in the 6-month report. So hopefully that allows us to move through in order. If anyone has any questions that they would like to submit online through the meeting, if you could try and hold your questions till we get to the portfolio that they would apply to, and it'll allow us to kind of stay on topic as we move through. Just so everybody knows, at the end, after we move through the portfolios, again, in order as they are in the 6-month report, I'll speak to the inclinator and a number of COVID-related questions that have been brought forward. As we get to that point, if you have a question that didn't really fit into any of the categories that we discussed, then that would be a great time to ask that, and then and we can do our best to answer that. So starting off, we'll discuss finance. What I'll do is I'll read each of the questions and answer them as we go along. And like I said, when we get to the end, any questions that have been submitted online, we'll answer those as they relate to finance. The first question is under operating revenue. Under food and beverage, sundry shows that the expenses exceeded revenues. And how did that variance come about? The main reason for that is labor. As we show labor on the operating schedule there, it does not include the wage subsidies. So that's just the labor alone. Labor has also been higher as we operate during COVID, as you've probably noticed down at the halfway house and up on the patios. We have extra staff to help out with disinfecting areas as we turn tables. So really, it's the biggest expense on that is labor, and that leads to the discrepancy between the revenue and expense there. The next question relates to the profit or the surplus that we've been showing to date, and asks what we're forecasting that to be by the end of the year. It is a little bit difficult to forecast very accurately exactly where we think we're going to land. The main reason for that is the wage subsidy. We're getting to the point now that we may not qualify for the wage subsidy in a couple of months as we near the end of the summer, which is fine, because that's simply related to our revenues hitting the threshold that the government has put in place. So because of that, it does make it a little bit challenging to figure out exactly where we're going to land. With that being said, though, subsidy or no subsidy, we're going to work extremely hard to break even on every month. We do not want to give anything back as we work towards finishing the year. With that being said, though, we are forecasting the surplus to be around $400,000. Another question relating to that is, what would we do with that surplus if that surplus in fact exists at the end of the year? The biggest factor that we need to keep in mind is that we are carrying a deficit from previous years. We did have a deficit, an operating deficit in 2018, and obviously a fairly large one last year. Under normal circumstances, that deficit would be passed back to the membership as an assessment. If you recall from previous communications, we decided to defer that till later this year to get an idea where we would finish on the year. So if we do finish the year with a surplus, that surplus would be applied to the deficit from previous years and offset or eliminate a potential assessment. If we make more money than the operating deficit from previous years, that money would not be spent. That money could potentially go towards the loan, or we would simply bank that going into next year. As we start to build our budgets for next year, there are a great deal of unknowns, obviously, and I think to have a little bit of buffer as we navigate through next year would be good. But either way, we won't be spending that money, and as we get a better idea of where we sit at the end of the year, that would be communicated to the membership. Another question on finance is what is indoor sports? What does that encompass? That includes swimming lessons, aquafit, personal training, fitness assessments, and as well as the cost to maintain the equipment in our fitness rooms. The next question is what is the category contingency under operating expenses? Contingency for this year includes the winter damage that we had with the erosion in the new year, as well as the executive search fees, and as it pertains to filling the COO's position, and COVID-related supplies. So all of our disinfectants and wipes and whatnot, we've been tracking that separately, and that would fall under contingency. Again, a few more questions here on finance. Question here referring to deferred revenues. Please explain how these relate to initiation fees receivable, and what assumptions have been made regarding realizing initiation fees for those trial members joining the club this year. So deferred dues revenue, which is just over $2 million, relates to the portion of dues paid by full members in 2020. So essentially we're realizing 50% of that at this time. We would smooth that over 12 months. And at the time that the report was written as 6 months, that was 50% of the year. Unearned trial membership dues of just under 200,000 relates to half of the dues received from the 2020 trial program, which the club is carrying over to next year. So if you recall, for trials that are joining this year, whatever point they join this year, they have this year, and then as well, their trial is covered for next year. So at the time that they join, they would pay their full dues for their category at the time that they join. However, we're not realizing those full dues in this year. We're putting 50% in this year and carrying forward 50% to next year. Initiation fees receivable represents the balances that are due from members that have already joined the club and are on a payment schedule for their initiation fees. And at this point, we have not made any assumptions regarding the initiation fees from the current trial program. That's something that we're going to be working on in the next month or so. We're also working with the membership committee on potential incentives that we may want to put forward to help convert as many trials as possible going into next year. At the bottom of the balance sheet, this question relates to the $122,000 listed for unrestricted, and understanding why this figure is negative. That unrestricted is essentially showing our loss from previous years, or our deficit from previous years. So that is applying the difference of the surplus that we've had 6 months against the deficit that we started the year with. So hopefully, if we continue on the path that we're on, we'll get that number to zero by the end of the year. So that concludes the finance portion. I'm just taking a look here at the screen to see if we have any questions relating to finance. Marianne, did you have anything you wanted to add before we move on?
No, Jason, that was perfect the way you answered those questions. So thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. So next we'll move on to membership. The first question relates to if there's any plans to increase the maximum numbers as it's listed in the bylaws for any of the categories. At this time, there are no plans to increase the overall membership numbers for each of the categories. The next question relates to spousal members, asking if any consideration has been given to spousal members moving up and down categories at will. An example, a senior member moving down to spousal, then back up to senior the following year, and then potentially down again the next year. And the question is, how does this benefit the club? Last year, the membership committee did a full category review with various subcommittees, and one of the subcommittees did look at the spousal category and did discuss this factor within that. The decision that was made at the membership committee was to leave the spousal category as it is, for members to have the ability to move up and down. The couple things that are important to mention is the spousal category is quite restrictive with the amount of golf that can be played. The other thing that's important to keep in mind is if a member decides to move down, it is better to have them stay within the club in the category versus leaving the club altogether. The next question, with the tee sheet being so full, are we going to stop taking new members so that existing members can get on the course? This has been something we've been watching very carefully. Obviously, COVID has created a number of different variables with demand on the tee sheet, and we are doing quite well with our trial program, as you would have seen in the 6-month report. So effective on Tuesday, all the trial categories have been closed. So no more trial members for the remainder of this year, and we've created a wait list. If someone was to come to the club and decide they wanted to join a particular category outright, as in no, they weren't going to trial, they were ready to join and commit to an initiation, that we would allow that. But beyond that, we have created a wait list. What the membership category and management have been looking at very carefully is the balance of the number of trials that we bring in this year, keeping in mind that the trials that have joined this year will be here next year. Obviously, there's attrition every year within the current membership, but we also need to look at how we responsibly bring in trials next year to keep the pipeline healthy beyond 2021 and into 2022, all while navigating a busy tee sheet, and a tee sheet that we expect will be equally as busy next year, and until we move beyond COVID. But nobody expects that to change anytime soon. So it is a careful balancing act, but that has been the decision that has been made for the remainder of this year. So that concludes the membership questions. I think I see a question up here online regarding membership. So the question relates to, I don't know if everybody can see this, so I'll just read it out here. Basically, in between 18 and 19, it states that we lost over 10% of our full golf members that left the club. This is 34 out of the 337 full-time members. Can we provide detail on the reasons why so many full members left in 2019? That number doesn't represent exactly members that may have left the club in its entirety. That also represents members that may have moved into different categories. The full category has been something that the membership committee has been looking at very carefully for the last 2 years to determine how we can better market that category as well, to attract members to move into that category when they join the club. A lot of new members to the club also just go straight into restricted. So we are looking at the value proposition of that and how we continue to promote the full category. I don't see any more questions regarding membership. Jim Carmichael, do you have anything you'd like to add before we move on? Oh, you're muted.
There was a question posed by a member that I read, but has since been, it appears, deleted, which was, do the trial members pay, are they getting 2 for 1 in terms of dues? Which
Yes.
they are.
Yes, for this period they are. So for 2020 and 2021, it's essentially they are getting a 2 for 1. Just a quick little background on that is the decision was made on that by the membership committee. It would have been back in early April when we really had no idea how our golf season was going to unfold. And we had reduced our COVID budget, if you will, down to 0 trial members. We wanted to at least come up with some kind of incentive to attract potential trials to the club. So obviously we've had a lot of great success with that, and we hope with those higher numbers we'll get some good conversions next year. But yes, that is the case. So I believe,
Jason?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's Catherine. There's a question here, kind of probably overlaps Jim and I here, relative to training new members on rules, course etiquette, and course maintenance, and so on. So I thought maybe certainly when members are approved to hire, they have given some guidelines. But there's also the ambassador program, which I think runs at different levels of effectiveness, but there could be ambassadors for people to kind of give them some of the rules of the road here at Credit Valley. And I know that with the intermediate program, they had a few town halls to get all of the new intermediates, you know, aware of some of the standards of etiquette and expectations relative to divots and balls and ball flight and so on. I don't know if that speaks to the question, but Jim, if there's anything additional to add there, it's a lot of people who come in have experience as a private club. So you're not starting from scratch, but we do try to support them with different means of making sure they're clear on how to adhere to the rules of Credit Valley.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that.
Okay, I do see a couple of additional questions here relating to membership. One being, if the trial membership goes 2 full years, if you join in May 2020, are you staying till 22? No, it's not the case. It was really, if you happen to join early in the spring, then you really are getting 2 years. But effectively, it's whenever you join in 2020, and then those trials will all expire. I believe it's October 31st of next year, of 2021. So that's how that was positioned. Another question is the number of members that have ambassadors. Teresa's working hard on building up the ambassador program and giving trial members different options. Some trial members embrace the program and they want to work with an ambassador. Other ones, to Catherine's point, are joining the club and have come from other private clubs and are already comfortable with the club environment and don't have a lot of questions. So we're really working hard to create an ambassador program that it's more a la carte, I think, that gives new members that are looking for that help and for looking to meet new people, then that's there for them. And for those that are comfortable as is, then we can proceed that way. Question relating to the how many left, how many moved, actually how many left the club and how many went to a different category. I don't have that number in front of me. And if it isn't given to me before the end of the meeting, I could email that individual and give that number. Sorry, it looks like my screen went dark. I'm struggling with light here in my office. So there's no other questions for membership. We'll move on to golf. A couple of questions relating to golf. Given the congestion on the tee sheets, please advise why we do not limit the number of guests on the most congested days or permit guest bookings to 24 hours in advance. The decision made by the golf committee is to allow members to book guests in following the draw. So once the draw is made on any given day, if there are vacancies on the tee sheet, then those can be filled in by members that are willing, that would like to bring a guest. The thinking behind that approach is the members at least get the first crack at picking their tee times on any particular day. It is important to note too that the revenue that we've foregone on guests this year is a significant impact on our bottom line. But again, it's a tough line to walk in terms of maintaining revenue and keeping up with the member experience and the demand on the tee sheet this year. The next question is asking how the tee sheet works to detect bogus ballots. I think what this individual is getting at is if a particular member or a group of members are booking a time and they're using other members' names as placeholders and then switching those names out at the 11th hour, or using those placeholders to hold a spot to ultimately put a guest in. That's a really hard question to answer. The Pro Shop, Donovan's team, do keep a close eye on that, and they do try and crack down on those situations when it's obvious to them. It is important to note, though, that sometimes these, although it may appear that people are trying to game the tee sheet, there are honest mistakes that happen too. But again, Donovan's team does keep a close eye on that and does try to circumvent that as much as they can. The next question pertains to pace of play. As it seems to be a problem, as the question states, it seems to be a problem that groups have encountered at numerous times, and these issues have not been reported. And it states that they're not clear on what the proper pace of play is currently. So the current pace of play that we're targeting to is 4 hours and 12 minutes. As of Saturday, the golf committee has decided, as recommended, and the board has approved, that the tee sheet will move back to 9-minute intervals in an effort to get more people out on the golf course. With that change, the pace of play will be changed to 4 hours. We'll be closely monitoring, obviously, how that change impacts pace of play and the pinch points that we're used to seeing on the golf course, right, such as 6T and 11T. But again, this is a good first step to seeing if moving to the 9-minute tee intervals does allow us to get some more people out on the golf course without eroding at our pace of play. The other point that's important to mention, and I think this is kind of where the question is coming from, our current average pace of play is 3 hours and 45 minutes. Sometimes where we find we run into challenges, or where the golf shop runs into challenges with managing pace of play, is if you have a threesome in carts, they're going to be moving very quickly, and then if that's sandwiched with a threesome or foursome that's walking, and then a group behind them that's in carts, the group that's in front will obviously fly. They'll be long gone. The group in the middle, if they're doing what they should be doing in terms of maintaining pace of play, they would be perceived as slow by the group behind them. What the Pro Shop will be promoting in a situation like that is if the group that's in the middle does see an opening in front of them and they are maintaining the proper pace of play, that they're welcome to wave through that group behind to keep things moving along. But unfortunately, it just is one of the challenges that we're having when you have a threesome or a foursome that has 3 carts out there, and we all know that the pace of play is quite quick. So it is just one of the challenges we have this year to navigate through. I don't have any more submitted questions relating to golf. I'm just taking a peek here. if there's anything.
Jason, there's a couple of questions came up about membership.
Oh,
We could take a backtrack.
I don't. Oh, can trial members become a trial member a second time? No, they cannot.
No.
You can only trial once. Was there another question that I've missed? I don't see.
Yeah, some latitude for family member guests.
I don't really understand what that question means. Maybe if that individual could elaborate on that, we could come back to it. Catherine, did you have anything you wanted to add for golf before we move on?
Yeah, we are super mindful of the 3 hours 45 that we've been clipping along the course set this year. I mean, everyone is really enjoying the pace of play, recognizing that there is a bit more time at the halfway house now that we can have socially distant tables sit up there. But not many people are sitting for long periods of time at the halfway house. I think the notion of keeping the play moving is important. You will have noticed in the last week, we also put out the clocks to kind of remind people that when their tee time was, and if your tee time doesn't match where you are, then it is a gentle reminder to continue to kind of keep up with pace of play. I haven't actually seen it yet myself, but I know the carts have the capability too of sending a quick message to anyone in the group if there's a group falling behind, to just make sure they keep pace with the group ahead. So we are really trying every angle to keep what has become a brisk pace of play, and yet still allow for the enjoyment and the walkability of our course. So, you know, that's I think the two things that I wanted to add in there. And I think that speaks to the question here about have we considered removing the tables at the halfway house to encourage eat while playing. It's what we don't want to disencourage is people purchasing at the halfway house, and I think eating while playing is easier on a cart than when you're walking, but I think just the message going out about pace of play continues to encourage people to keep time at the halfway house to a minimum. I think that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, to circle back to membership, the clarity on the question was asking if the potential guest is a family member is currently inconvenient with respect to planning to have to wait under the current system. I'm sure that's something that the golf committee could review, but for now, the policy for guests is as stands. So we'll move ahead to oh, so I see a pace of play question. Oh, maybe we got to that. It's gone. So moving ahead to greens, there's been a number of questions regarding etiquette. Etiquette is an ongoing challenge here at Credit Valley. It's an ongoing challenge at golf clubs everywhere. We've been looking at it closely on the greens and house committee, as well as golf, and it has come up at membership too. To circle back to the orientation for new members, the greens committee is carefully looking at different means to help promote etiquette on the golf course. For those that ride, you may have seen the videos with Chris in them on that trigger on the par threes as the reminder on how to repair ball marks. Beyond that, I'm going to be totally honest, we don't have all the answers, and this is a tough one and an ongoing one to how we promote this and work to get the message out there and remind people to practice course etiquette. But we are working on different options, and some of that will be with the starter, with future communications and whatnot to help remind people. I think it's important to note as well, and I think this brings to light all the more reason why we need to practice course etiquette, is we're well over 1,000 rounds a month higher than where we normally are. So that's a lot of divots. It's a lot of ball marks. It's a hot summer. A lot of those divots don't get a chance to repair themselves. And obviously under COVID protocols, that's had to change our protocols with how we manage divot filling. And this is something we'll continue to look at going forward in terms of how we can get as many divot bottles in people's hands as possible to keep on top of this. But it'll be an ongoing issue unfortunately for a long time, I think. But we're certainly not ignoring it at the committee level with multiple committees as we move forward. the next question, this is a good question. I think it's on a lot of people's minds that have played golf in the last 3 weeks. Is in regards to our neighbor behind 4 Green that appears to be doing some kind of expansion in their backyard. The question is simply asking if do they have permits? Did they communicate with the club before they did their work? And are we concerned with what the final outcome will be on that project? Yes, they did get permits. No, we weren't asked to comment on it before the work started. I think what I would ask is we'll give it a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. We'll wait and see how the project comes together. That does give us an opportunity to plant some kind of vine or something that might creep up and cover that area. But it absolutely is unsightly right now, but there's definitely realistic options that we have that could potentially actually make that area nicer. I know it's always been a challenge for the green staff for as long as whether we've played that hole as the old 3 or as 4, with the bushes that grow up from the neighbors' backyards and encroaching on that very little piece of land that we have between the back of the green and the property line. So we'll see how that unfolds, and as it unfolds, we'll come up with some strategies to make that as soft on the eye as possible. Another question relating to greens is the tee decks appear to be rounding on the edges. I think the easy way to describe it is they almost seem to fall off on some of the edges, and there's some crowning on the tee decks as well. Both of those items are part of kind of the living, breathing entity that a golf course is. As ground settles around the tee decks, that's when the edges slowly start to slough off. The crowning that occurs in the middle is a function mainly of that's the area where the tee blocks are set up the most. So as divots are made in those areas, those are the areas that have the most divot mix applied to them. And over time, the divot mix piles up, and that's how you get that slow crowning of the tee deck. A couple items that are in place and options that we've looked at to move forward is last year we purchased a new top dresser that allows us to more accurately apply sand to the tees and gives Chris and his team the option to apply more sand along the edges of the tee decks to help combat that crowning that occurs in the center of the tee decks. Also, as well, the daily course setup of moving of where the markers are placed allows to increase wear to different areas and get more divot mix down. Barring all of that, in some areas those 2 aforementioned measures would not be enough. There are contractors out there that we would work with that would essentially strip the sod from the tee deck, set that sod to the side. They would laser level the tee deck and then reapply the sod in behind. That's a project we've got pricing on a number of years ago, and as unfortunately as we've operationally been in a pinch the last few years, that's a project that's been deferred. So that's something that will remain on the radar and will remain a higher priority that hopefully we can knock off in the coming years, and that'll be something that'll be addressed on our capital maintenance and expenses as we move forward. I'm just taking a look here at the screen to see if there's any more questions related to greens. Peter, if there's anything you wanted to speak to before we move on, keeping in mind that the inclinator will save that for the end.
You're muted, Peter.
Thanks, Jason. The only other point was that we discussed the starter being more proactive to remind people, and it's a very, very simple technique, but when people are reminded to carry the divot mix and to fix ball marks, it can be very effective because it's almost a daily reminder for each time you play. Very, very low tech, very simple. And I played today and we really did not find the ball marks to be too bad at all.
Okay, thank you. A couple questions relating to divots. Yes, one of the things we have talked about is the starter reminding people to take divot bottles and to make sure they have their ball mark repair tool with them. That's absolutely one of the first touch points where we can get in people's ears to remind them. The other question related to divot mix bottles on the carts. Again, this relates back to the COVID protocols that right now, if you would like to fill divots, you have your own divot mix bottle for the whole year. And when a card is pulled out, it shouldn't have a divot mix bottle in the back of it unless it's inadvertently been left there. So it's everybody's got to take care of their own bottles right now to fill them up at the self-serve stations, at the starters tent, and down at the halfway house. But measures such as this is something that we'll be looking at as we move forward, and as we may potentially loosen different protocols. But for now, it's important to lessen our touch points. So moving ahead from greens, we'll move on to strategic planning. There's a couple questions here relating to some relating to strategic planning, but also just different items that have been on our radar for the last few years that will have an impact years ahead. The first question asks if the current master plan for the golf course is still valid. The master plan for the golf course is a separate document, I'd say, from the strategic plan that we'll be putting together. And I'll back up a little bit on the strategic plan as well, just to reiterate what was mentioned in the 6-month report. Within the next couple weeks, we'll start to be pulling together the focus groups that will be randomly selected within different demographics of the membership. These focus groups will be meeting with representatives from Global Golf Advisors, and there will not be staff or board members present in these focus groups. These focus groups will have a series of questions, and based on the answers of these questions, will help produce the questionnaire that will go out to the entire membership after the focus groups are completed. This will be a big tool to be added to a ton of research that's already been completed by Global Golf to help us put together our strategic plan moving forward. And that strategic plan will be a living and breathing document that boards will hold on to for years and years to come. That will change and evolve as we continue to evolve as a club. As it relates to the master plan for the golf course, what we currently have isn't void, but at this point it's really on pause until we wait and see what the results are from the strategic plan. What we learn from the strategic plan and what we learn from what the membership wants and what the membership believes is important, those are the factors that we'll take into account as we start to look ahead with the master plan on the golf course. It may stay the same, it may change, it may change priorities. Again, it's important that we hear to see what the membership wants, and then we can move forward from there on a strategy, and as well as the strategy for how we could finance these projects. The next question relates to the timeline. So the goal is to finish the focus groups in the last week of August, and likely that may go into the first week of September. After that, it'll be about 2 or 3 weeks to compile the results of the focus groups and put together the questionnaire that'll go out to the membership. So that would have the questionnaire going out to the membership around the end of September, and then it would be about another 6 weeks for Global Golf to put together the report that would have the results to share with the membership. So we're realistically about 2 months out to complete that. As we move along, we'll keep everybody up to date. Next question relating to the 10th hole and the slope erosion project with the City of Mississauga. I spoke to this briefly a little while ago, so it's a good question because it is progressing, the work that is with the city. We did meet with the city back in February at their request, as they are moving this up their priority list as a project to do. The timeline, and this was pre-COVID, so this may change, but the timeline that they were working to at that time is that right now they're working on the design for the work to be done on 10, and in March of 2021, the project will go out to tender with the expectation that the project would start in November of 2021 and to be completed in March of 2022. The city has gone over in detail with us what their plan is, what that impact would be to the golf course, what the impact would be to the river, future flooding, looking at flow rates, ice dams, and everything in between. Based on the information that we've reviewed with them, with their engineers, there's very little impact to the golf course, whether it be aesthetically or geographically in terms of how the golf course plays or may change. There would be no changes to the golf course with this plan. And to be quite frank, probably a year after the project is done, you probably won't even be able to see that it was done in the first place, which is great. As far as disruption to the golf course is concerned, because the project would be carried out from November to March, there would be obviously a lot of construction activity on the golf course, but for the majority of those months, we would likely not be playing any golf. What would be done with the city is we do have easement agreements with them, and we haven't finished negotiating this yet, but the city has come forward to say that they would be responsible for any damage obviously caused to the golf course with their haul roads and access to do the project. So it's a big project in scope, but when it's all said and done, it really has very little impact on the club. Another question asks regarding the teaching barn to be installed on the cement pad on the far side of the range. There's no plan for that at this time. Simply put, we don't have the funds to embark on a project like that right now. Again, this is stuff that I think will come out in the strategic plan and helping us map out the plan moving forward with when we would tackle projects like this and where they would fit in on our priorities. Brent, did you have anything you'd like to add for strategic planning before we move on?
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. I just did want to add a couple of things just to maybe put this in context for the membership. You know, over the last 18 months, a lot has happened in the club environment, which gives us a big opportunity here. I mean, obviously we have a new chief operating officer, and COVID has obviously given the industry a real shot in the arm, mostly for the positive. I mean, I think the outlook for golf now is a lot different than it was 2 years ago. But those factors combined, I think, give us a real opportunity to rethink everything about how we're doing things from the bottoms up. And we're going to rethink everything as part of this process, so to make sure that we're providing the best value that we possibly can to the membership. And then the other thing I would add, Jason, is that this process is meant to be objective. There are no sacred cows. There are no preconceived agendas. You'll see how the focus group process is being done completely independently of the board and the management team. And the survey is going to be something that we've not done in the past. This is not like the survey you get after you have dinner at the club. This is going to be a survey that's really going to be able to test what members want and what they will pay, what they're willing to pay for. So we're going to have a lot of good independent data at the end of this, which is going to enable us to come forward with, I think, a very robust plan for the next several years.
Okay, thank you, Brent. So we'll move on from strategic planning then, and that, from what I can see here online and the questions that were submitted, that really concludes the questions as it relates to the 6-month report. So we'll move on now to just talking about reopening, COVID, and the inclinator. As it relates to reopening, one of the questions asked here, and several other members have asked me this question too, is what our plan is in relation to locker rooms, fitness, and the pool. I've been working with Anna for the last few weeks in terms of what a reopening plan for fitness would look like and how we can do that responsibly. We do nearly have a plan in place for that. But as it pertains to how we move forward on this, the board is meeting monthly, and each month at our board of directors meetings, we are reviewing the plan moving forward and how we may want to reopen different amenities at the club. There's a multitude of factors to keep in mind as we move through this. Obviously, safety is the most important. Safety for our membership and safety for our staff. Looking at how we can do this responsibly, again, from a safety perspective, how we can fiscally do this responsibly, and what the value is to the membership on how we can reopen these areas. You know, to say we reopen the locker rooms doesn't mean we can reopen the locker rooms and have, you know, have the bar service going and shoe shine going and showers and everything like that. The challenge that we have is the rules that are out in front of us in terms of how we manage these areas, such as shower facilities and the cleaning and the cleaning protocols that are in place between each use. It does add multiple layers of complexity. So it's not to say that these areas are closed for the rest of the year, but what I would like to stress is that we are reevaluating this and figuring out how and when we can reopen these areas and do it responsibly. I think everybody wants to get everything as open as possible to allow us to enjoy our club as much as possible. But again, it's all under the caveat of responsibility as we move forward. We'll continue to communicate on this as we're ready to potentially move into, you know, unpeeling, I guess, another layer, so to speak, as we move into other areas of the clubhouse. A question relating to COVID: have we had any positive cases amongst our membership or staff at the club? My answer to that is, to my knowledge, no. What would happen if that did happen? If somebody at the club was to come down with COVID, we would be mandated by the government to shut down for a period of time to completely disinfect the facilities, and then through contact tracing, it would be determined obviously who came into contact with that individual. So obviously it would be very disruptive to our operation, and obviously very disruptive for those that were at the club, as there would be a number of people that would be in quarantine. The measures that we have in place, though, that would obviously expedite that process if God forbid that was to happen, is that's why we do reservations on the patios, so we do know who's coming and going from the different areas, and obviously the tee sheet as well. So between those two controls, we do know as people are coming and going through the club, and we do know the areas where they're frequenting. So like I said, in the unfortunate event if that was to happen, we do have the means in place to responsibly alert others that may have come into contact with that individual. But it would be very disruptive to the club, absolutely. Just getting caught up here for a second. If any board members would like to chime in for a sec here, just while I get myself up to speed.
So there's a question here about a requirement of members to report whether they've tested positive. It would be as people fill out the forms. The question we're all answering as we fill out forms for golf in particular is whether we've either tested positive or come into contact. So that's the driving force. We've also found that as people have been filling out the forms, a number of us have reached out to Jason to tell him what's going on in terms of you know, people having to go for testing because of being in contact with someone having surgery or whatever. So you know, we're not going to get into the legality of whatever it is, but certainly that's why we have the T-sheet questionnaires filled out by everybody.
Yes, thank you. The other question that's been brought up by a couple of individuals is the flags, we'll say, on the putting greens. Can we put them back? Can we put the holes back on the putting greens? On the two putting greens at the driving range in front of the pro shop, the easy lift, the little apparatus to pop the ball out of the hole that we have on the golf course, those don't fit on our putting green flag sticks. So that wouldn't really work. Unfortunately, we'll have to stick with the method that we have currently. Another person asked about if we could do this on the short game area. That's a possibility. That's something we could look at, because as we know, the flag sticks out there are the same ones that we have on the golf course. So that could be an option. But excuse me, for the time being though, on the putting greens, it will have to remain as is. So the last item that I have here on the list for tonight is the inclinator. I'll give a brief update, if you will, in terms of how we've gotten to where we are within the last couple days. And then obviously to talk about what is going on currently with the inclinator. It's often hard to communicate this in its entirety through writing and the different communications that we've put out to the membership. But the long and short of the issues that we had with getting the inclinator up and running were the challenges that we had with the TSSA and their interpretation of the rules and how it pertains to an outdoor inclined lift. I've mentioned before, there's very few, as in under 10 of these in the province. So what happened was our contractors, they put the design together and they apply for all the permits to do the work with the TSSA. They submit the design as it's going to be built. The TSSA has the option to comment on it, which they did. Our contractor didn't question those comments. They went straight ahead and incorporated all those comments into the design build for the inclinator. After the inclinator was installed, an inspector comes out to check the inclinator to ensure it was installed as designed. However, that inspector has the ability to, on the spot, request changes to the design of the inclinator, whether it be safeties or otherwise. And that's exactly what happened. We had two different inspectors. We had the effects on each inspection. We had one different inspector. And in fact, these inspectors, as an example, the first inspector asked us to add weight to our counterweight, which we did. And on the second inspection, the next inspector asked that weight to be removed from the counterweight. So that added a number of challenges. And I know I feel sometimes like we're making excuses, but that was very challenging for our contractor to work through this basically at the whim and dealing with what factors the TSSA was laying out for us. I think what complicated it from the TSSA's perspective to look at it from their perspective is because there's so few of these in the province and no two are alike, they can't apply the normal rules that they would see for an elevator in a condominium or an office tower. So the long and short of it is, it was obviously a bumpy road to get there. We did have a couple of hiccups as well operationally with the inclinator while we were working through that. So we did have the curveballs from the TSSA. We did have some growing pains, if you will, when we started the inclinator out. And when you put all that together, it was a perfect recipe for the challenges that we had at the onset. If we could do it all over again, yeah, there's definitely a couple things we would have handled differently to avoid some of the inconveniences as we worked our way through it. But what I will add is the contractor that we're working with has been very cooperative as we've worked through these challenges. We are on budget. The budget for the inclinator, if you recall, was $250,000. We are tracking to finish below budget. We don't have the exact number. There's still a couple of where we will finish. We're still waiting for a couple of outstanding invoices. But like I said, we are tracking to finish below budget on this project. The challenges that we've had to date, the contractor has been absorbing those into their costs as we finish the inclinator. So there's been no additional costs, as in not one additional cost at this point, as we've worked through these challenges. The challenges that we've had as of late are really, these ones have been challenging and unfortunately unforeseen. When the inclinator was being installed, as you can imagine, and if you've ridden up the inclinator, you may have noticed there's really no plant life on the ground underneath the track. It's all bare soil. For the 3 or 4 months when the work was occurring on the track, the technicians were motoring up and down the hill and loosening up a lot of that soil. A couple weeks ago, with a couple of downpours, the rain events that we had, a lot of that loose soil washed down to the bottom of the inclinator. At the bottom of the inclinator is where the counterweight will make a stop, and obviously the car as well. And portions of the track filled up with silt. As the car went through that silt and the counterweight went through that silt, some of that silt was picked up on the rollers and started to clog up the rollers and the roller bearings. So that's what started the counterweight to just be off kilter, if you can imagine, as it rides up the track. Instead of it being perfectly in line with the tracks, it was on a slight angle. With the safety checks and balances that are in place on the car and the tracks, it wasn't meeting those safety checks at the exact times that it should have been, based on that offset from the counterweight. So because of that, we started having a couple of instances where people got stuck on the inclinator, which then led to the breakdown that led to us closing it down and finding these issues. So I guess if there's a silver lining to this, we know what the problem is, and we're currently working to fix it. We're expecting the new wheels will be installed by Tuesday next week. And in the meantime, Chris's staff are working to mitigate future erosion issues. So with these two challenges behind us, we should be fine. But that's where we stand right now as far as the inclinator goes. And we'll continue to keep everybody up to date. But for now, we are on track to have everything back online again by early next week. Question relating the contractor that's responsible for the inclinator is Quality Allied Elevator, QAE. I'm just reading another question here. Peter, if you have anything you want to add before.
Yes, if you don't mind, I will. I think, to put it bluntly, some of the people that are questioning us the line of concern is, did we go about it the right way, and do we know what we're doing, and does the contractor know what he's doing? If we want to be very blunt. And looking at the process, I think we did proceed the right way. To be responsible, we gathered a committee with expertise, set budgets, set a scope of work. The contractor has been quite responsible to even beyond the scope of work that they have. In retrospect, the problem was there's a word called commissioning. When a unique piece of equipment like this has to be run, it needs a commissioning period. And because of COVID and the delay to actually get this approved, more than it was to install it, it was a delay on the approval. We were right up against the playing year. So we've been suffering from these growing pains of unique software, tweaks to the temperature controllers and things like that. And then the nitty-gritty things, literally nitty-gritty, like Jason just described. There's about 5 or 6 of those. Not to make excuses, but I think the process is coming to an end through this commissioning and finding where those problems are. It's just unfortunate that it happened right in the middle of the golf season. We would have been better off to get it in 4 months ahead. That's my take on it.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Yeah, the question that was asked here is, assuming the TSSA requirements do not cause the operational problems which were recently described, why did the contractor not anticipate these issues? We did anticipate this to a degree. When we built the structure at the bottom, the little roof that the inclinator sits under, we did build a retaining wall on the far side. I don't think anybody can probably see it the way the car is positioned at the bottom. But we did build a retaining wall to prevent erosion down there, because we were aware of erosion in that location. However, nobody thought of the loose material coming down the hill. Because for years and years, there's been plant material on that hill that's kept that loose material stable. The one thing I'll add is not to confuse it. It's not like the bank is failing or anything like that. This is just all the dust that's been kicked up from people walking up and down the hill, and then all that loose material washed down to the bottom. So it's not like a major erosion event by any means whatsoever. Again, it's just the loose material that's been kicked up that made its way down to the bottom. So like I said, we do have a plan to mitigate this, and it's very, very affordable. It's not a big deal at all. We just got to get these measures in place before we reopen, which we are. So with that being said, that concludes the number of questions that have been submitted to me in advance, and I don't see any other questions here online. The last question that just popped up is, the contractor responsible for the additional cost of the people mover? No, they're not. We're not holding them accountable for the cost of the people mover. However, to Peter Hossack's point, with the number of additional costs that are even beyond the contract that they have absorbed, the money saved there is far greater than what we've spent to keep the people mover going during this period. Yes, Peter?
I think we're also negotiating an extension on our warranty
Yes.
That's another aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that being said, I don't see any other questions, and I don't have anything else to add. Suzanne, I'll turn it over to you.
Just thanks to everybody who called in and has dialed into the Zoom meeting. Thank you for participating. And please, if after the meeting something occurs to you that you wish you'd asked, please feel free to either reach out to Jason or myself or to the relevant board member. We want to make sure that all the questions get answered to the best of our ability. Thanks, and have a wonderful evening.